Joined now by former Vancouver Canucks general manager and executive Brian Burke. Presentation of the Whistler Golf Club. Counting down to opening day on May 10th. Club reminds organizers of groups of 12 or more it's time to lock in those tee times for any time during the 2024 season, as prime times are filling up fast. And just for reaching out to hold that time, you, the group organizer, you play for free. Whistler Golf Club, take care of the rest. Tell us about your group. whistlergolf.com/groups. Brian, how we doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
You're more than welcome. Fantastic time of year to be a hockey fan. What races are you watching? And specifically, what do you make of the Oilers trying to track down the Canucks here?
Well, I'm in Utica. I'm here for the Women's World Championship. So you guys got to talk a little women's hockey first.
And
we'll talk Canucks all you want. No, it's been exciting. It's been obviously the coaching change. I really like the coach they let go, but obviously Knobloch's done a great job. And they've made an amazing run, and they've caught the Canucks basically, or almost caught them, despite the fact they're having a great year as well. So it's been an exciting race in the West.
What do you make of this Canucks season and the job that Rick Tocchet has done on the bench?
Well, I think he's done a great job. I think the goaltending has been terrific. Both goalies have played well. Thatcher Demko, I think, is a legitimate star. I think Casey's done a real good job filling in. I think the big acquisition they don't talk about very much, Quinn Hughes is a superstar, no question. But the Ronick acquisition to me is the key to this whole thing. He's made their whole team better and different. And Rick Tocchet's done a great job coaching the group.
There's not a lot of manager can do at this point in the season with the trade deadline long past. I mean, they're attending to college free agents and such. But with the Canucks scuffling a little bit here, what levers, if any, like, is there anything a manager can do, or does Patrick Allvin just have to sit on his hands and hope that the coach has got this to get this team where he wants it to be come game one of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think all you do now is pray. Once you get past the deadline, you just say the rosary as many times as you can. Your job once the deadline passes, your job is to be a cheerleader. You walk around the room, talk to guys, pump them up, praise them. Remind guys you need a boost to do something different. But you're basically a cheerleader after the deadline. It's the worst time to be a GM because the games are so critical and it's so tough to watch those games and see your team slip out of contention or move down, lose a spot, lose a standings place that will cost you in the playoffs because you're going to play a team you didn't want to play. It's very excruciating for the GM.
Managers always say that, whatever happens, and coaches too, in terms of those playoff matchups. But we heard Kevin Bieksa mentioned back in 2011, they were hoping for Tampa Bay in the finals. Deep down, usually there's a favorite, right? Oh, we really want to face those, even if they don't necessarily say it publicly.
Yes. And they don't say it publicly because they don't want blackboard material. Sure. But fact of the matter is, privately, they will have discussed this at great length and agreed that this is the team we'd really like to play if we could. Now, sometimes that bites you right in the ass.
How much pre-scouting is already going on, Brian? Would you normally be looking at your potential opponents and getting the pre-scouts ready at this stage?
Yeah, it free up people after the deadline, right? All your pro scouting people are unemployed after the deadline, really. So you can use them in pre-scouting, and that's what we always did. We always set there are 3 or 4 possibilities you'd play in the first round. So you'd send a guy to track them and get their tendencies and get their line combinations, get their power plays, and then focus as you keep advancing. The list gets shorter, obviously, but there's more teams that you have to watch that you didn't watch. And then you're really not pre-scouting the Eastern Conference till you get to the third round.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of pre-scouting, we saw it again on Saturday. The LA Kings with this 1-3-1 defensive system have given the Vancouver Canucks all sorts of headaches this year, not to mention other opponents as well. And sometimes even the fans who don't love the passivity of it all. What do you make of that 1-3-1? How difficult of a nut is it to crack?
Well, I think any system can be beaten with tactics and with good players. So I think to beat the 1-3-1, the thing for me is you have to have speed through the neutral zone and get an outnumbered attack. So almost like a power play where that F1, who, if he's the center, you have 2 guys coming at speed. One guy can't cover 2 guys. So one short pass should beat two players, should spring guys out, and it works pretty well when the Canucks are playing their style and using their speed. You can crack that pretty easily in my mind. It's not new. 1-3-1 is not new.
No, I'm almost surprised that it's back, Brian.
Yeah, it's really. I think it's easy to beat if you have speed and you get outnumbered people, just like a power play breakout to me. So I wouldn't worry much about that. The key is, if whatever system you have, if you play it with enthusiasm and vigor, you're going to have success. It's that simple. It's never changed.
You know this market well, Brian. You tried your darndest in your times here with the Canucks. It feels like we forget what playoff hockey's about here in Vancouver. It's been a while since they hosted playoff games. What do you think this market would look like with a semblance of playoff success? And I mean, that goes across Canada because all the Canadian teams have been starved for playoff success of late. But this one in particular, people in over 50 years now waiting for this. What do you think it would look like if it happened? And, being a first place team, I think people's minds are wandering there.
Well, first off, it's a great hockey town, and I had 2 tours of duty there, and I absolutely loved both tours. They're very different, as you know, Blake. You were there. When I worked for Pat, we came in. We were a non-playoff team. We had a lot of empty seats. We ended up jamming the building and going to the finals a couple years after I left. Came back in '98, did the same thing again with a different cast of characters, different owners, but filled the building up again. And people went nuts for that team. People still talk to me on the street about that team. If we'd only gotten a goaltender, we could have won. We could have done this, could have done that. It's a hockey crazy town, and they are starved for a winner. So I think that there's no fluke to this season. They've been in first place or second place all year. They're a legitimate contender. They've got the components to break down. You've got enough skilled forwards. They got enough grit, I think. Their D is much improved. Their goaltending is great when they're both healthy. They're in position to take a deep run here. Now, what happens is, number one is everyone, and I hate this because I'm going to do the broadcast speaking, repeat the keys to the game that everyone knows. So, Captain Obvious, thank you. But it's special teams, staying healthy, and it's execution at key times and goaltending. So it's going to come down to the same factors it has ever since they started awarding a Stanley Cup. And I think they're in a good spot. I think they're in a good position to take a deep run. I like the coach immensely, and I like the players. I like their team.
You might have just worried Canucks fans mentioning special teams.
Hey, Brian, would you think this is the thirstiest market for a Stanley Cup, given a big Canadian city and never having won? And did you ever allow yourself to dream what the parade would look like in this city?
I never got that far. I felt we were close. I still believe, going back, and this is talking to players too. I want to talk about the tax differential in a second, but don't let me forget that.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is, we never solved the goaltending problem. And Dan Cloutier, I think, was a legitimate starter in the league. He got hurt every year right before the playoffs, and we were going into the playoffs with a guy who was coming off an injury. 3 years in a row that happened. And they got Louis, and you see what happened, where he stayed healthy and played well, and they went to the finals. And should have won a cup, in my opinion. Just had to hold serve in Game 7. But I think that excitement and that level of intensity and anticipation is for sure. They're as hungry as anyone. Now, they've never won a cup there. They've been to the finals, 3 times now or twice? 3 times.
3, yeah.
3 times.
3 times,
and,
2 Game 7s.
Yeah, and no, they're that close. I think that people say, how come there hasn't been a Stanley Cup champion in Canada since '93? I think people have to realize that the handicap that the Canadian-based teams are at from a tax perspective, they are taxed so much more heavily than their U.S. counterparts, and it's exacerbated in the states that have no state income tax. So Florida, Nevada, those Tennessee, I believe.
Texas,
Texas. Those they have a distinct advantage. They build it into their collective bargaining or their negotiation with players. Like they'll say, like Steven Stamkos. I remember when they made the pitch to get him in Toronto, they offered $1.5 million more, and Stamkos said no. His after-tax income, I believe, at 8.5 was the same as at 11 or 8. That couldn't be that big. At 10.
Sizable though, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's the biggest factor. You get your no trade list from teams, and all the Canadian teams are on the no trade list. If you get a no fly zone for 8 teams, 7 of them are Canadian. So it's a real problem that we have to figure out a way to deal with this. I think the cap should be after tax dollars.
We've been talking about that this year, Brian. Like once upon a time, and you were around, the NHL had sort of an equalization program for Canadian currency. Is there something that can be done on a league level for these differing tax jurisdictions?
I'm not sure. The answer is yes, but the problem is to change the system in negotiations and collective bargaining. You need to have a pretty strong case to do that, and you'd have to have the players agree or take a work stoppage. And I don't think anyone's ready for a work stoppage over that issue. So they'll just have to do the best they can for now and see what happens.
We want to talk to you about your PWHL exploits and the Worlds in a second here. Last one for me on the NHL, though. And you have had a lot of business dealings with Sid and probably have a little insight into his mind and maybe, you know, just what his inclinations would be. I mean, is there any possibility he wears a different crest before he retires?
I can't see it, frankly.
No.
I can't speak for Sid. I had Sid for 2.5 years. It was a real pleasure. It was funny. I was doing an interview about 2 months ago. Someone asked me who my favorite player was that I ever had, and I said Teemu. And Odie, my girlfriend, said to me right away after the interview, "What about Sid?" And I'm like, "Yeah, how did I forget Sid? Sid would be the answer. As far as being a quality player and a quality person, would be Sid. And Teemu a close second. Teemu was a joy as a player. He's such a good player, such a good person, such a good teammate, and Sid's all of those things. So I can't see him going elsewhere. I really cannot. But I can't speak for Sid. I don't know what's going to happen. I know one thing. I never saw him as disappointed, as devastated as after they traded Jay Kensel.
I can attest to the Burke-Solani relationship. I remember covering the Western Conference Finals in 2006, and as Teemu was walking up to the dais to do his press conference, the World Championships were going on, and his general manager was trash-talking him about Finland's performance at the Worlds, especially against the U.S. It was great fun to watch those two go at it. Hey, Brian, what about LTIR load up? Where are you as a manager watching these teams, in some cases now 20 million beyond the cap because the LTIR cushion? We've seen it in Tampa. We're seeing it this year in Vegas. Is this something else that deserves or needs to be looked at by way of remedy?
Yes, it has to be addressed. It's not being used as it was intended when they collectively bargained this, and it's being abused in my view. So I think, it has to be looked at. Again, you understand the players, to fight this, players would have to go so far as to accept a work stoppage. I don't think they'll do that for LTIR. I don't think the league was willing to do that. So the answer is, we got to work on it. Much like the thing I just talked about, the tax differential, I can't see that suspending players, holding up play or stopping play for any issue of that magnitude. Even though as important as they are, I can't see us shutting down to get those things.
I got one more, Blake, and beyond what you want to talk to him about with the PWHL and the response that we have seen, Brian, the sold out games in Toronto and in Montreal. Tell us about your involvement and how do you think it's going here as the season pauses for the Worlds before getting back for the stretch run?
Well, I came in, I was signed up late to this. I didn't help negotiate this deal. I can't take any credit for it, nor have I attempted to, nor will I. But it's been phenomenal. The response has been unbelievable. And the response in market where we have teams has been great, but the response all across Canada and the U.S. has been wonderful, including a couple neutral site games. So we played a neutral site game. We have one coming up next weekend in Montreal, sold out in 2 hours, 21,000 seats. Scotiabank Arena sold out, 19,000 seats sold out in a couple hours. They had a crowd. They've routinely had crowds of 8,000 in Minnesota. And so the response has been Pittsburgh 8,000, Detroit 13,000. So it's been phenomenal. And I think it's, as far as a launch, it's been the most successful launch of any women's sports league in history, in my view. So I again, taking no credit for it. It's been really exciting and gratifying.
100% agree. I hope, and guys like you, I'm sure, and people like you will add their 2 cents on this. I hope they don't expand too quickly. We know the talent pool, it should be bigger than it is. We've screwed up with that historically, but it's going to take some time. I hope they're not going to get too ambitious, are they, and get too big too fast?
Well, I don't talk to ownership. I'm head of the union. I don't talk to ownership. They don't. I've never talked to Mark Walter in my life. I've talked to Stan Kasten, who from the Dodgers, who's running the business side of things. I've told him exactly that I hope they're not in a hurry. The product is fantastic. It's exceptional, but it's still not economical. Like, we're losing a lot of money. These owners are writing big checks right now. And the temptation would be you could wipe out all those losses with one expansion. But I've said that to them. I told Stan, I hope they don't go too fast here, because I think the slow build is the right way to go. We have 6 teams. That guarantees there's superstars on all 6 teams. We go to 12 teams, there won't be superstars on all 12 teams. Now we've got a great wave of young talent coming. You'll see some of these women play tomorrow or tonight. The Canada, U.S., there's a bunch of young NCAA stars that are going to be in our league in a year or two. So we've got a new wave coming, just like the NHL always seems to have that new wave coming. But I hope they don't go too fast here. I'm with you on that.
Hey, Brian, because we've sat here and watched the league from Vancouver and said, boy, it'd be great to have a team ourselves. But does sort of geographic concentration have to be a part of the league right now as it grows from an economic standpoint?
Well, if you care about money, it does. Yeah. You care about money. And I think these people care about money because they're writing big checks now. Those checks only increase in size if you add teams from far away without close. You have to have some geographic grouping. So my prediction would be some expansion that makes geographic sense to start. Say, add 4 teams. You could add Pittsburgh. You could add Buffalo, Detroit. You could add teams in that neighborhood and still keep a bus league for the most part, a couple flights a year. But right now, the only place we have to fly is Minneapolis or St. Paul. So, and then down the road, when you get to, say, add 4 teams that way or 2 teams that way, and then you make the big expansion, say 6 years down the road and go west, and then you have to fly. But I think we're still a ways away from that. My vote's going to be.
There's no chance that these closer games at the Worlds are already the dividends of the PWHL, are they? Like, is that just coincidence? But it seems like the scores are more competitive than what we've seen. Is a half season of PWHL already adding to this, do you think?
I think so. I've said this for years. You guys know this is not a new complaint. I've said we play too many games in the NHL for years. Remember the first day I worked at the league in 1993, Gary Bettman called me and closed the door, and he said, I want you to tell me one thing that would make this league dramatically better. You can sleep on it if you want, but one change that would make a world of difference. I said, I don't need to sleep on it, Gary. We play too many games. And Gary said, well, we can't reduce the number of games at this point. I said, well, you asked me. We play too many games. I've said this since I came into the league in 1993. I think we should play 70 games or 72, whatever that number works out, where the schedule works out. But I'm never going to win that battle. And if they go to expansion, it's going to get even worse, I think. The travel will get even worse. So I believe expansion is on the books. It's going to happen. I believe it's a tragic mistake. I believe it'll be followed closely by increasing the number of playoff teams. Again, a tragic mistake in my view, but I think they're both going to happen.
Lastly, Brian, our friends Travis Green, Thatcher Demko, others who have made their way up the Canucks ladder when the farm team was in Utica, tell us amazing things about the Adirondack Bank Center and the atmosphere there. Enjoy the World Championships. Thanks for the time here.
Thanks very much.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.